Consultative Association has predicted a shutdown of small and medium-scale businesses, as well as the shutdown of many large businesses if the lingering naira crisis persists. And Transparency International has ranked Nigeria amongst the most corrupt countries in the world, and that's despite the anti-graft fight by the Buhari administration. And of course, more discoveries of banks hoarding new naira notes and creating an artificial scarcity is persistent. These are the issues we are discussing. Feel free to join us via our studio line 0902-2231-011 or 0817-6248-565. We've got some messages right here on Facebook. Let's quickly chip in most of your comments. We'll start with this one coming from Parliamentarian Udemega Ebu. It says, Mr. Speaker, the aim of redesigning the currency has gradually been defeated, if not totally defeated. The implementation of the policy is extremely poor. New currency is being hoarded, and it will get worse by next week when the deadline for the swap elapses. Okay, it says crisis is looming and something drastic must be done very fast. Okay, just to clarify quickly, because I still think a lot of persons are quite confused about some of the CBN's policies and the deadlines. Again, just to reiterate, February 10 is the deadline for the use of the old notes as legal tenders, meaning from the 10th of February, you cannot buy anything with the old 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes, but you can continue taking them to the banks to swap for the new notes. Okay, so after February 10, don't be scared of taking your notes to your banks in exchange for the new ones, but you cannot use them to purchase anything or use them as a legal tender from the 10th of February. All right, let's hope people are guided in that regard. UB Emmanuel says, good morning. I've come to realize that Nigeria is no longer an independent country. They can't survive well. I pity Nigeria, for God has given us 88% resource, both land and sea, more than any country in the world. I can't say I regret being a Nigerian, but as long as out of this country, I think China should come to a rescue. Okay, that's taking it quite too far. But thank you all the same for joining us. Hope More Jr. says, if this scarcity of money continues, many may not vote because lots of businesses are affected and everything is on the high side. Nigerians are not happy and may not turn up to vote. Those corrupt bankers using this period to make illegal money. All right, the last line of your comments is really not necessary, so we have to skip that. But thank you all the same, Hope More Jr. Phileas O'Ben says, good morning, Mr. Speaker. The CBN governor should be solely blamed for this crisis. He failed to take into consideration the fact that while the CBN aims and objectives is for the sole benefit of Nigeria, it is not so for the commercial banks. Theirs is to make profits for their shareholders at all costs. Now the CBN is in a pickle. They cannot suspend the policy. That would be an admission that it was wrong, hence undermine its credibility. They cannot sanction the banks either because they can quite frankly make the situation even worse, and without their cooperation, what's the point? Well, the CBN has said it will sanction any bank who falls or goes against its policy around the redesign of the new naira note and how it should be implemented. And some banks, in case you do not know, have already, faced the brunt of deciding to go against the CBN's policy. Only we're hoping that the implementation through the monitoring team that's been set up by the CBN would fast-track its activities in terms of monitoring how the banks are complying with this directive. We did mention earlier on, some state governments have taken the initiative. Borno State is one of them, with Governor Zulum over the weekend, going around so many banks in the state, warning them that anyone who flouts the CBN directive would go in for it. So as to whether or not the CBN can actually sanction the banks, yes, they can. And by the way, we're only referring to a branch of a particular bank who errs. Let's say, for instance, you have a Sterling Bank, and one particular branch of Sterling Bank errs against the CBN's policy. It doesn't mean the entire Sterling Bank across Nigeria would be shut down. That particular branch would be shut down if it's found to have erred. So if we can understand this, then good for us. And quickly, Noya Idiom says, good morning, parliamentarians. I think the prediction done by the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association on shutdown of small and medium-scale businesses as well as the shutdown of many large businesses if the lingering naira crisis persists, may surely happen if something is not done immediately, because as it stands, some businesses have started to experience low turn-up of sales due to scarcity of the naira note. And it says INEC may experience low turnout for the mock accreditation. I think the general election will not experience this.
All right, let's get to hear a lot more from parliamentarians via the phone lines. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, parliamentarian.
Good morning, the leader of the House.
Yes.
This sort should be an interactive one because I hear you from your end. However, I want to talk about the CBN policy. Most especially, the one they said that after February 10, the should be we should be collecting from the bank. That means the legal is still valid. So if the bank have every 10 and they still collecting the old that means the money
No,
in the account. Look for someone that will pay them and the commission and take the other one to the bank.
it's very important that we know the naira extension for the old naira notes to be still returned not to the banks but rather to the CBN is just an added grace period by the government to ensure that people who still could not, within this time frame can still return up until that date. It is not to say that it is still going to become a legal tender and operate side by side with the new redesigned naira. Please, let's be properly guided. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and the lovely House. My name is Idonate Chibon. My take will be on the issue of PVC stuff, kind of stuff. You see, I called, was it 3 weeks ago, that people are going around buying PVCs, and thank God others have also confirmed. But I want to plead with INEC that they should make that PVC that they are buying useless, so that the money they use in buying that PVC is present. That is what I'm expecting to see from INEC, so that we have credible elections when it comes calling, so that we have good leaders elected by us, the electorate. Aside from that, people are complaining that the introduction of new notes is not good. It is good, though, at the timing is very bad. It now, dollars have now fallen. That is one step forward to achieving the purpose of which this naira was introduced.
Hello, ma'am. Many thanks. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning, leader of the House.
Yes, good morning.
Mr. Can you hear me, please, sir?
Yes, very well. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, we
I'm
can.
not sure, but let me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I am wishing you something here this morning. The Speaker, this morning I want to complain on the issue of high price of fuel in our state, and as well as Nigeria. The Speaker, it's a pity that a liter of fuel is now sold at 500 naira. I don't know the leadership we are having in Nigeria. Not forgetting that our president promised us that whenever he put into office, that he will make fuel sell at the final 8 naira. I don't know why. So on that note, I want to charge and call on the NSC to call a nationwide strike, so that our lead will now have the more power and him. Away from that, Mr. Speaker, I want to please and cry for the state governor that after 3 months that he be out of the office, he should not forget that a year before last he called on the retired primary teacher to come for verification. Up till now, he only paid up to 2010. So I want to charge him and plead him not to leave that loan for his society. Please, entitlement, because I know that when they be paid to account people, that will boost economic of the this Mr. Speaker, I plead and cry for our government that these are crime. And you are made safe, which you can make with this.
All right, many thanks for joining us. So take a couple more few comments before we welcome more contributions from parliamentarians via the phone line.
Yes, let's quickly get this one from Medion James. It says, good morning, parliamentarians. Please forgive me for not saying anything related to the news. Banks in the Kwabam state haven't given out new or old naira notes because every day the banks will say there is no money. POS charging highly, and it's so annoying. Imagine 10,000 naira, you were given 8,000 naira. I am very, very angry. And yet the banks can issue out new naira or new naira notes or the old ones. Okay, you understand your grievances. Honorable Ephraim Morris says, good morning, Mr. Speaker and leader of the Parliament. Imagine going through a whole Ikonek Road yesterday from 6 to 8 p.m. with over 10 or more fuel stations, none of them selling fuel. They're hoarding fuel in their underground tanks. They hope the fuel to sell it one after another with different prices. They decided to sell it the way it pleases them in order to make more profit, since no government agency is there to monitor their activities, to regulate the prices, and make sure that their underground tanks are checked properly to be sure that there's no fuel in it before they close. The fuel ones who opened at other locations sell for 450 to 500 naira a litre. It's very bad for us as people to do this to our fellow humans. The government is not helping the people. They allow them to punish the masses every day. Let the government inaugurate a task force to go around and checkmate what the fuel stations are doing, not the task force that will go there and be compromised by the directors and the managers. Good word indeed. Quite a lengthy contribution, I should say. Prince Anatia says, good morning and happy new week. The ranking by Transparency International is nothing but the truth. The dealing and activities of our rulers, the issue of the high cost of fuel, the scarcity of the new naira notes is part of the proof that Nigeria is over-corrupt. All right, thank you very much, Prince Anatia, Mr. Speaker.
All right, that's much we can take from the comments coming back. And of course, I would like to excuse the House Leader to attend to all the matters that are begging for his attention. But in case you just joined us, we still have a couple more room for some more calls. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, good morning, parliamentarian.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the good work you are doing in the studio today. I appreciate it. My name is Chief Udanya. Please, I want to complain bitterly because I've noticed it, that there is a lot of corruption. We are talking about corruption going on in public schools, and I will want the Commissioner of Education to come and explain why there are extortion in public schools, and it is still going on. Now they are collecting money for continuous assessment, which are printed by principals and head teachers and sell and make profit and share it with those in government, with the government authorities. I want to use this opportunity and call on the governor of Akwa Ibom State to provide this booklet, a unified one, because the Akwa Ibom State government does not have a unified continuous assessment booklet. They should provide it as done in other states.
All right, I'd like to quickly ask you a question, parliamentarian. Do you have proof of headmistresses and teachers and head teachers collecting this money from pupils and their parents?
Yes. They go to printing press and print it. They are the contractors now.
To me, so that we can get to verify these. You can forward it to the WhatsApp number 090. 7787198.
That is what we are calling on, because the result is everywhere now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. That is not something we want to see, and if it's verified, then the Education Commissioner in Akwa Ibom State and relevant government functionaries need to address the scenario, and of course let Akwa Ibom know what steps are being taken. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Okay, seems that parliamentarian is not ready to talk to us. Just one more call, and we will call it a wrap on the floor of the plenary session for the month of February 2023. And yes, some more comments on our Facebook page. Okay, before that, the last call. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Hello, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, good morning, parliamentarian.
Hello.
Good morning. Go ahead. We can hear you.
I said for every 10 to be the new will be used as a legal tender. And yet, is corruption is very for the last and if you say people, you are not financial businesses for other people. That's my take. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your contributions. I'd like to still reiterate that this is not the scenario. It's just an extension by the CBN to ensure that people who could still not return the naira returns it. It doesn't mean it is going to be a legal tender cooperating side by side with a new naira note. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the plenary.
Hello.
Good morning, parliamentarian.
Hello.
Sorry, seem to be having some network challenges from your end there, but that's the size of the contributions that we are going to take this morning. Now, I'd like to particularly appeal to you, Akwa Ibomites, to all of us as Akwa Ibomites. It's about time we walk away from selling our votes. I'd like to appeal to all Nigerians. It is that time for us to look away from whatever present day satisfaction or gratification we may have by selling our mandate to corrupt politicians, because whether you like it or not, when you sell your vote, you limit the chances of the right candidate from becoming the next leader, whether at the presidential level, the federal house, the state house, and of course the governorship position. If we do not move away from selling our vote to corrupt politicians, then we do not have any moral ground to accuse INEC or to accuse the politicians themselves of being responsible for our problems. We need to be content with whatever we have. And yes, the economic hardship is real. It's biting on each and every one of us. But we can hold ourselves down for just 1-2 months, reject what amount of money is being offered to buy our vote, our conscience, our mandate, and what of democracy would have enjoyed in the next 4 to 8 years. It is up to you. It is up to us as a people to decide whether we want to continue living in nations or liberated. And of course, the responsibility to do that is in your hands, is in my hands, is in all of our hands. My name is Francis Edward, and on behalf of the House Leader Remanita, I'd like to leave you with this one by Tuba, by the host of all the Nigerian celebrities, and it's called Don't Sell Your Vote. I hope it gets to your heart and touches your heart and makes you to take that right decision today.
Sell your vote, just sell your future, because sell your birthright. How much sell? Divide that by 4 years. How much that? Don't sell your vote. No matter the thing them they tell you. No matter the thing they do you. No matter how much money them just give you. Don't sell your photo. Don't need to fight, oh. Because your picking no go join you. And so they won't turn out they laugh you. Oh, don't sell your photo. Yeah. Okay. The situation, everything hot for this our nation. So poverty and inflation, line still fuel station. This gotta change by determination. This election, intimidation. Just a lot we gotta make sure everybody counts for the future.
Well, don't let anybody deceive you. Don't let them take over from you. Now your future be that. Yeah, I do be that, yeah. Oh, yeah. Together we can make Nigeria better. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They think them the devil decision they are. No matter the thing they do, you no matter how much money them get, no tell your phone.
Oh, they bang your car. I beg you, time done again, and done this shit. No stand title, now follow the title. Over to you, so now speak up to you. So don't let anybody come for you. If I is you, no tell for some money. No about your right, your whole for poop.
I got it. I don't say shady. Say shady. I can look at the way I'm taking the top of you. They make a engine, you are the England. Oh, bye. We got that big kid, no, that. I go, they won't fall out the love for it. Oh, don't sell your phone for your bad.
See, baby, don't make mistake today, go spoil your tomorrow. Mommy, daddy, see, baby, the time don't come again to go, so make we match, so we go come do it together, we go decide our future.
Oh, no matter where you come from, we're part of a great nation, that's so. Everyone stay with me, yeah. From the hilltops of the island, from the back from the pool back there, to the exciting, we got battle. From our hearts to so from our hearts to the no one is left behind. Together, with each other. Oh, my baby. Votes are only with your PVC, man. Thank you.
Good morning. This is the news update at 10. President Muhammadu Buhari condemns deadly attack on vigilantes at Yangoje Forest in Ankara local government area of Katsina State. Presidential candidate of Labour Party Peter Obi urges Nigerians to bear with federal government and Central Bank of Nigeria's CBN over redesigned naira notes. Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila says lawmakers may reconvene if hardship occasioned by naira swap continues. On a foreign, St. Pope Francis and Protestant leaders denounce anti-gay laws. And in sports, Harry Kane becomes Tottenham's all-time record scorer as his 267th goal for club dents Manchester City's Premier League title ambitions. Up next is People in History.
It's rising, rising like the sun and shining forth, sustaining life like never before. It will never set. The Planet Radio Station, 101.1, Uyo, Nigeria. This is the place to be.
They are the geniuses, the legends. They are the conquerors of our world, achieving feats larger than life, and leaving us when all those they did before us. History, your 1-hour detailed documentary on the life and times of great heroes and heroines.
In sin for a seat.
Andy and Jean, who later became the Peach of Aquarium, is outstanding and brilliant. He's very patriotic, very loyal.
Comes your way at 11 a.m. You can listen to any past episode of People in History just by logging on to our website www.planet101fm.ng or click on our podcast to listen to the episode. History is connecting to 101 FM.
Cato was very well respected in the community.
He was a real whole person.
Probably the most educated man in the city of Philadelphia, white or black.
Cato was an extraordinary human being. Cato was a Philadelphian.
He was Octavius Valentine Cato, teacher, loyal Union man, baseball player, and civil rights leader, whose life was cut short on the volatile and violent streets of Philadelphia.
Wade in the water, wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. Gods are gonna trouble the water.
In the 19th century, Philadelphia was home to America's largest free, black, pre-Civil War community, and as such, played a major role in the fight against slavery and for African American rights of citizenship and opportunity. Black Philadelphians thoughtfully and purposefully created a community that reflected an African-American worldview. Richard Allen and Absalom Jones each founded America's first black churches in 1794. The African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas and Mother Bethel as a means to overcome the racism faced by blacks in white churches. Philadelphia blacks joined together to petition Congress to abolish the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which permitted masters to pursue runaways across state lines. During the War of 1812, the community recruited 2,500 black men to defend Philadelphia against a possible attack from the British. The community saw these actions as ways of demonstrating that African Americans deserved all the privileges and rights of citizenship.
In 1863, weeks before the Battle of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin issued a proclamation urging volunteer enlistment to protect the state from a Confederate invasion. In Philadelphia, Cato raised a company of 90 African American troops. But those men wouldn't be permitted to join the effort of the other volunteers to defend the state because the commander of the Department of the Susquehanna believed that Congress wouldn't permit men of color to serve limited terms. Cato wasn't deterred. He returned to Philadelphia and supported the enlistment of men of color into the Union Army. He also served with the Pennsylvania National Guard and as a major and inspector for the 5th Brigade of the United States Colored Troops.
Here's early black community, which began to solidify in a neighborhood along Lombard Street near the Pennsylvania State House, known today as Independence Hall, was integral in the abolitionist movement and Underground Railroad. The community also produced successive generations of leaders, male and female, who grew to local and national prominence in the years before the Civil War. Our focus for today is one of such leaders, one who made a mark both locally and nationally. He was a learned man whose insistence on equality for all men has been categorized as fanatical. He was linked to virtually every important black movement and the inner circle of radical Republicans of his time. In the late 1860s, he became a national spokesperson for enfranchisement and civil rights for African Americans. His name Octavius Valentine Cato.
Cato exemplified the best qualities of his generation. He excelled in sports. He excelled in academics. He excelled in community leadership. He was the future perfect for the African American community. And had he not been cut short.
Of People in History takes a look at the life and times of a man who was a 19th century scholar, educator, and civil rights activist who dedicated his life to breaking down barriers of social injustice, pushing the boundaries of social constraints, and working with other African Americans across the country to change forever the meaning of the United States Constitution. Octavius Cato was born free on February 22, 1839, as his mother was free. Sarah Isabella Kane was a member of the city's prominent mixed-race DeReeve family, which had been free for decades and belonged to the Brown Fellowship Society as a mark of their status. His father, William T. Cato, had been a slave millwright in South Carolina and gained his freedom. He was ordained as a Presbyterian minister before taking his family north, first to Baltimore and then to Philadelphia, where they settled in the free state of Pennsylvania. The state had gradually abolished slavery, beginning before the end of the Revolutionary War.
He was born in South Carolina in 1839 to free mixed-race parents. In 1848, his father, then a widower, moves the family to Philadelphia.
In many ways, Philadelphia is one of the most precarious cities of the North, at least for free black Philadelphians.
He was born a free man. His father, William Cato, had been enslaved and a millwright who earned his freedom, eventually becoming an ordained Presbyterian minister. His mother, Sarah Isabel Kane, was a member of a prominent family in Charleston, South Carolina, where Octavius was born. Mr. Cato moved north with his family when he was a child. He became educated and was the valedictorian of his class at the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia, which would become Cheney.
Philadelphia, Cato began his education at Vaux Primary School and then Lombard Grammar School, both segregated institutions. In 1853, he entered the all-white Allentown Academy in Allentown, New Jersey, located east of the Delaware River.
Charleston was a place of great opportunity for free blacks.
For Octavius to have been raised there until he was 9 or so as a free person of color, that put him in an exotic and difficult category.
By the 1830s, many free blacks were headed north to Philadelphia.
Octavius was raised in a comfortable middle-class setting. He went to the Institute for Colored Youth, which was a Quaker school which took in young boys and girls. It's a school that has a quite broad liberal arts curriculum. And out of this, Cato himself eventually goes back there to teach.
Cato used his education in the classroom, as well as to impact public policy and social change. He used his fame to inspire the African American community to new possibilities.
1954, when his family returned to Philadelphia, he became a student at that city's Institute for Colored Youth, ICY. Managed by the Society of Friends Quakers, ICY's curriculum included classical study of Latin, Greek, geometry, and trigonometry. While a student at ICY, Cato presented papers and took part in scholarly discussions at a Young Men's Instruction Society. Led by fellow ICY student Jacob C. White, Jr., they met weekly at the ICY, which eventually was renamed as the Banneker Institute in honor of Benjamin Banneker. Cato graduated from ICY in 1858, winning praise from Principal Ebenezer Bassett for outstanding scholarly work, great energy, and perseverance in school matters. Cato did a year of postgraduate study, including private tutoring in both Greek and Latin in Washington, D.C. In 1859, he returned to Philadelphia, where he was elected full member and recording secretary of the Banneker Institute. He also was hired as teacher of English and mathematics at the ICY.
Free black Philadelphians find safety and solace in each other and in institutions, like the Institute for Colored Youth, an advanced academic high school that trains students for intellectual careers. Octavius Catto enrolls in 1854 at the age of 15 and graduates valedictorian 4 years later. In 1859, he returns to the Institute for Colored Youth to teach.
On May 10, 1864, Catto delivered ICY's commencement address, which gave a historical synopsis of the school. In addition, Catto's address touched on the issue of the potential insensitivity of white teachers toward the needs and interests of African American students. It is at least unjust to allow a blind and ignorant prejudice to so far disregard the choice of parents and the will of the colored taxpayers as to appoint over colored children white teachers whose intelligence and success, measured by the fruits of their labors, could neither obtain nor secure for them positions which we know would be more congenial to their tastes. Catto also spoke of the Civil War, then in progress. He believed that the United States government had to evolve several times in order to change. He understood that the change must come, not necessarily for the benefit of African Americans, but more for America's political and industrial welfare. This, he said, would be a mutual benefit for all Americans. Open quote. It is for the purpose of promoting, as far as possible, the preparation of the colored man for the assumption of these new relations with intelligence and with the knowledge which promises success, that the Institute feels called upon at this time to act with more energy and on a broader scale than has heretofore been required. Close quote.
No one way to define Octavius Catto. He was a complicated person. He was not just a civil rights leader, but he was also a tremendous athlete. He was the Jackie Robinson of his day.
Catto had been a proponent, as you can imagine, for the 3 civil rights amendments that came out of the American government after the Civil War, 13th, 14th, and 15th. And of course, the 13th gives blacks the right to vote for the first time in American history. And Catto had actually been sent south to gain support for that amendment. And Catto, though, understood the value of that issue and the history and the future of that issue and what it meant to African Americans at that point in time.
He understood that he had to seize the moment.
Saying anything's possible. And he's not talking about the distant future. He's talking about what's possible now in an integrated Philadelphia. And he's talking about black people asserting themselves to gain those rights, and specifically the right to vote.
On January 2, 1865, at a gathering at the National Hall in Philadelphia to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, Catto delivered a very able address, and one that was a credit to the mind and heart of the speaker. In 1869, Bassett left ICY when he was appointed ambassador in Haiti. Catto lobbied to succeed Bassett as principal. However, the ICY board chose Catto's fellow teacher, Fanny Jackson Coppin, as head of the school. Catto was elected as the principal of the ICY's male department. In 1870, Catto joined the Franklin Institute, a center for science and education, whose white leaders supported Catto's membership despite his race, in the face of some opposition. Catto served as principal and teacher at ICY until his death in 1871. His successor in the position was Richard Theodore Greener.
1967, he became captain of the Pythian Baseball Club, an exclusively African-American team which he organized with a friend who was a fellow graduate of the Institute for Colored Youth. The team was highly successful, declared the best colored team in the city and perhaps in the nation. In the late 1860s, Catto became the highest-paid teacher in Philadelphia. In 1869, he was promoted to principal of the Boys Department of the Institute for Colored Youth. This is especially poignant because he was an advocate for the cause of educators of color, educating students of color.
War increased Catto's activism for abolition and equal rights. He joined with Frederick Douglass and other black leaders to form a recruitment committee to sign up black men to fight for the Union and emancipation. After the Confederate invasion of Pennsylvania in 1863, Cato helped raise a company of black volunteers for the state's defense. Their help, however, was refused by the staff of Major General Darius N. Couch on the grounds that the men were not authorized to fight. Couch was later corrected by U.S. Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton, but not until the aspiring soldiers had returned to Philadelphia. Acting with Douglas and the Union League, Cato helped raise 11 regiments of United States colored troops in the Philadelphia area. These men were sent to the front, and many saw action. Cato was commissioned as a major, but did not fight.
Both his friends and his students to go to Harrisburg and enlist. The governor and the general in charge say no. The federal government is not happy either and instructs Pennsylvania, don't do that again. And from then on, in fact, black troops are permitted. Cato doesn't enlist, but he does spend the rest of the war actively recruiting black troops from all over the North. He travels. He's a big-time recruiter.
On Friday, Cato's presentation speech was reported the following day in the Christian Recorder. Open quote. The speaker then paid a tribute to the 200,000 blacks who, in spite of obloquy and the old bane of prejudice, have been nobly fighting our battles, trusting to a redeemed country for the full recognition of their manhood in the future. He thought that in the plan of Reconstruction, the votes of the blacks could not be lightly dispensed with. They were the only unqualified friends of the Union in the South. In the imperative language written on this flag, let soldiers in war be citizens in peace, the bank's policy may plant the seed of another revolution. Our statesmen will have to take care, lest they prove neither so good nor wise under the seductions of mild-eyed peace, as heretofore amidst the tumults of grim-visaged war. Merit should also be recognized in the black soldier, and the way open to his promotion. The Tocqueville prophesied that if ever America underwent revolution, it would be brought about by the presence of the black race, and that it would result from the inequality of their condition. This has been verified, but there is another side to the picture, and while he thought it his duty to keep these things before the public, there are motives of interest founded on our faith in the nation's honor. To act in this strife, freedom has rapidly advanced since the firing on Sumter, and since the genius of liberty has directed the war, we have gone from victory to victory. Soldiers, accept this flag on behalf of the citizens of Philadelphia. I know well the metal of your pasture, that you will not lag on behalf of the regiment, and may God bless you and them. Close quote. In November 1864, Cato was elected to be the corresponding secretary of the Pennsylvania Equal Rights League. He also served as vice president of the State Convention of Colored People, held in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in February 1865.
Before Octavius, Cato was one of 155 men of color from the North and South who met in Syracuse, New York, to form the National Equal Rights League, which is considered the first national organization devoted to promoting black equality. Cato was elected secretary of the Pennsylvania State Equal Rights League chapter. The organization rallied for voting suffrage, political causes, streetcar desegregation, and notably advanced and equal education for African American students from African American teachers. In January 1865, Mr. Cato delivered the opening address at the celebration of the second anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. He led demonstrations that helped push Pennsylvania lawmakers to ratify the 15th Amendment, and that barred voting discrimination based on race, and organized citizens of color and helped bring them to the polls to vote.
Cato fought fearlessly for the desegregation of Philadelphia's trolley car system. The May 18, 1865 issue of the New York Times ran a story discussing the civil disobedience tactics employed by Cato as he fought for civil rights. Open quote. Last evening, a colored man got into a Pine Street passenger car and refused all entreaties to leave the car, where his presence appeared to be not desired. The conductor of the car, fearful of being fined for ejecting him, as was done by the judges of one of our courts in a similar case, ran the car off the track, detached the horses, and left the colored man to occupy the car all by himself. The colored man still firmly maintained his position in the car, having spent the whole of the night there. The conductor looks upon the part he enacted in the affair as a splendid strategy. The matter creates quite a sensation in the neighborhood where the car is standing, and crowds of sympathizers flock around the colored man. Close quote.
67, Catto and LeCount succeed in their long-standing campaign to integrate city streetcars.
So while Octavius Catto is pushing for a state bill to open up the streetcars for everyone, Carrie LeCount has a plan to make sure it's enforced.
When a streetcar driver refuses to let her board, LeCount obtains a court order. The driver is fined the equivalent of $1,000 in today's money. To blacks living in the South Street corridor, the heart of the city's elite black life, this is a victory. To poor whites who live across the street in Moyamense, it's a warning sign.
A meeting of the Union League of Philadelphia was held in Sansom Street Hall on Thursday, June 21, 1866, to protest and denounce the forcible ejection of several black women from Philadelphia's streetcars. At this meeting, Catto presented the following resolutions. Resolved that we earnestly and unitedly protest against the proscription which excludes us from the city cars as an outrage against the enlightened civilization of the age. Resolved that we cannot discover any reason, based upon good sense or common justice, for the continuance of a practice which has long ceased to disgrace democratic New York, Washington, St. Louis, Harrisburg, and other cities, whose pledges of fidelity to the principles of freedom and civil liberty have not been so frequent as have been those of our own city. Resolved that, with feelings of sorrow rather than pride, we remind our white fellow citizens of the glaring inconsistency and palpable injustice of forcing delicate women and innocent children by the ruthless hands of ungentlemanly and unprincipled conductors and drivers to places on the front platform, subjecting to storm and rain, cold and heat, relatives of 12,000 colored soldiers, whose services these very citizens gladly accepted when the nation was in her hour of trouble, and they seriously entreated, under the chances of impartial drafts, to fill the depleted ranks of the Union Army. Resolved that, while men and women of a Christian community can sit unmoved and in silence and see women barbarously thrown from the cars, and while our courts of justice fail to grant us redress for acts committed in violation of the chartered privileges of these railroad companies, we shall never rest at ease, but will agitate and work by our means and by our influence in court and out of court, asking aid of the press, calling upon Christians to vindicate their Christianity, and the members of the law to assert the principles of the profession by granting us justice and right, until these invidious and unjust usages shall have ceased. Resolved that we do solemnly pledge ourselves to assist by our means any suit brought against the perpetrators of outrages such as those, the occurrence of which has convened this meeting, and we respectfully call upon our liberal-minded and friendly white fellow citizens to cease to remain silent witnesses of the grievance of which we complain, and to demonstrate the sincerity of their professions by an interference in our behalf. Later enlisting the help of Congressman Thaddeus Stevens and William D. Kelly, Catto was instrumental in the passage of a Pennsylvania bill that prohibited segregation on transit systems in the state.
He shares with many others, including a young teacher at the Institute for Colored Youth, Caroline LeCount. Catto and LeCount shared a love of learning, a passion for equality, and their hearts.
But someone has to test for law. She's 21, and she and her assistant stopped to catch a streetcar on Pine Street between 11th and 12th.
She was told, "Your kind are not allowed on streetcars."
She goes right to the courthouse, and files a suit against the streetcar company. And the judge says, I don't believe there's no new law. I don't know anything about it. She goes and gets a copy of the law. She takes the copy to the judge. He accepts it. The streetcar company is fined. And from then on, it is legal and proper, and blacks ride the streetcars.
Publicity about a conductor's being fined who refused to admit Cato's fiancée to a Philadelphia streetcar helped establish the new law in practice. Cato's crusade for equal rights was capped in March 1869, when Pennsylvania voted to ratify the 15th Amendment, which prohibited discrimination against citizens in registration and voting based on race, color, or prior condition. Effectively, it provided suffrage to black men. No women then had the vote. It was fully ratified in 1870. Cato was active not just in arenas of education and equal rights, but also on the sporting field.
African Americans believe the end of slavery will usher in a new era, and Cato's generation won't be deterred from fighting for equal rights. With each generation, the actions become much more aggressive. And I think it culminates with the activities of LeCount and Cato. There was this urgency for not just enjoying the trappings of freedom, but the urgency to participate in the process, the urgency to rise above all expectations, the urgency to break down the barriers. And that's why many people call this period of Cato the first civil rights movement. This desire to exercise your freedom is just so human. It's just so human that why not?
Many other young men of Philadelphia, both white and black, Cato began playing cricket while in school, as it was a British tradition. Later, he took up the American sport of baseball. Following the Civil War, he helped establish Philadelphia as a major hub of what became Negro League Baseball. Along with Jacob C. White Jr., he ran the Pythian Baseball Club of Philadelphia, and the Pythians had an undefeated season in 1867. Following the 1867 season, Cato, with support from players from the White Athletic Baseball Club, applied for the Pythians' admission into the newly formed Pennsylvania Baseball Association. As it became clear that they would lose any vote by the association, they withdrew their application. In 1869, the Pythians challenged various white baseball teams in Philadelphia to games. The Olympic Ball Club accepted the challenge. The first match game between black and white baseball teams took place on September 4, 1869, ending in the Pythians' defeat, 44-23.
Octavius wanted to paint a legacy on a very large canvas. Education, family, politics were but a part of his daily life. He loved competition, and he had a passion for a new and evolving game, baseball.
The Pythians formed in the 1866-67 season. They're very good, and he wants to play against white teams. And over the next 2 years, he lobbies, and finally in 1869, the Olympics. Played the Pythians. The New York Times puts it on the front page. Pythians plays another white team 2 weeks later and wins.
But that wasn't nearly enough for OV. An even bigger test lay ahead, one that would challenge the entire city and generations.
Confrontation, if he could have.
With the North victorious, slavery ends in 1865, but exclusion based on race doesn't end. Like many young men, Cato loves to play baseball. He is the captain of the Philadelphia Pythians, who go undefeated in their first season. In 1867, he appears before the National Association of Baseball Players and makes a case for his all-black team to be allowed into the league.
In a lot of respects, he was the Jackie Robinson of his day. Like today, Sports is kind of like the last frontier. If you can break the barrier in sports, then the rest of society kind of follows suit. So I'm certain that Cato must have understood how important it would be for blacks to do well in baseball. Not white baseball and black baseball, but baseball together.
Out of 266 other applicants, Cato's team is the only one with black players. And when the decision comes down, they are the only team denied admission.
He worked very hard to try to integrate it. He didn't succeed, but he had a vision that was so far ahead of where others were.
The Equal Rights Crusade was capped in October of 1870 when Pennsylvania passed the 15th Amendment guaranteeing voting rights for black men. But it was a long and harrowing path to acceptance by the majority. Due to the threat of rioting by the thugs and rowdy adherents of the ruling Democratic Party and its supporters in